Competitive Intelligence by Jeremie Aboiron. What is competitive intelligence? Competitive intelligence can be resumed by this sentence from Herbert Simon in 1977. Giving the right information to the right person at the right time. Informational and decisional systems. As we have just discussed, information systems play a significant part in the strategic analysis process, especially in the automation of certain tasks and processes. They are almost systematically organized in the same way: a phase of gathering, a phase of data analysis, and a reporting of the processed information. Indeed, according to internal contingency factors, organizations will set up more or less elaborated information systems to automate certain data processes in order to facilitate and improve the acquisition and diffusion of information within the organization. We will keep Riex's 2002 definition of an information system as it is, according to him, a set of social actors who memorize and transform representations via information technologies and operating modes. It is an organized set of resources, tools, software, data, procedures that help acquire, process, store, and communicate information within an organization. These systems are to be found more and more in businesses, and their complexity rate becomes increasingly higher as competition is stiff and intense. Today, businesses are ready to modify their operating mode and production processes depending on information systems. The factors that encourage these evolutions are: 1. The access to technology. 2. The availability of services. 3. Processing costs. 4. And storage costs. They are the criteria that encourage businesses to invest more heavily in their information systems. The Internet has also allowed organizations to be more present in a globalized economic war, whose variables sometimes change more quickly than the development of a new product. According to the U.S. Department of Economy, the investment into information systems compared to the total investments into a business has increased from 39% in 1980 to 51% in 2007. Therefore, an investment in IT represents today more than half of total investments. In Japan, businesses are organized around their information system and the priority is given to the gathering and processing of information. The information system has several impacts in terms of management. It allows more sharing and access to information, a better data analysis, a better reactivity, and more cooperation with stakeholders. As you can see in the following diagram, these is to be found all throughout the value chain, in logistics, purchases, production, sales, human resources, finance, and so on. Note that each executive director or manager will have, depending on his/her hierarchic position, to make more or less operative decisions. In order to achieve this, they will need to provide different kinds of information, but always as quickly as possible and of the best quality in terms of validity and reliability. The information system is as much a matter of information culture as an investment. Indeed, studies have shown that the value of an investment is not correlated to the profitability of an information system. Just like a unit of competitive intelligence, these meets the requirements of several determinants that stimulate its success. A favorable organizational culture, clear business processes, a strong management of information systems, a strong support from the board of directors, encouragement to innovation and management, a cooperative working environment, and a training system that encourages the manager's decision-making. Thus, The information system is at the heart of all of the business's activities and also related to all stakeholders. It must make decision-making possible and the diffusion of information easier. From information to decision-making. At the beginning of the 20th century, researchers had agreed that an individual systematically takes a rational decision. Yet Simon, in 1947, has questioned this stand by introducing the notion of limited rationality. Indeed, an individual only makes a decision depending on the information he or she possesses at the moment the decision is made. Meanwhile, Simon shows that an individual who does not have all information he or she needs for his/her decision-making, does not search for alternative solutions in order to obtain a more satisfactory result. On the contrary, an individual will almost systematically choose the least bad solution. Hence the importance of having an information system that allows the gathering and processing of an important and increasing amount of data. This will help the decision maker to have a maximum amount of information in order to optimize his/her decision making. We will not discuss the question of power struggles in the decision process the way they have been described in the works of Crozier in 1977. Note, however, that the roles of actors and powers can make a difference in the decision-making process. Opposite phenomena can also occur, as illustrated by the Abilene paradox. Not wanting to contradict themselves and to generate the stakeholders' dissatisfaction, all actors end up going against their respective and collective interests. The decision process can be broken down into two parts: the identification of a given problem and its resolution. Competitive intelligence will therefore happen in the resolution of the problem. We can notice that at this point the theory is in accordance with what describes the actions of competitive intelligence, namely, information gathering, analysis and decision making. Simon in 1977 describes the decision according to three distinct forms: structured decision, semi-structured decision, and unstructured decision. The form of the decision will join the type in a matrix built by Gorey that we will describe later. According to Anthony, in 1965, the decision-making varies depending on the type of control on which the decision works. It is composed of three large classifications: strategic, long-term; management, tactic; and operative, in everyday life. Gorey, in 1971, later on creates a matrix that correlates the type of control with the form of decision. The goal being that, at each level of organization and at each issue, the decision-making be based on an optimum analysis of data in order to get rid of uncertainty factors that weigh on the organization. Thus, we can notice that competitive intelligence processes are equal to decision-making processes. And especially that they act with the same goal: to allow the decision-making within an organization. From knowledge management to a learning organization. According to Grunstein, 2000, the management of activities and processes that enhance the creation and use of knowledge within an organization aims at two tightly linked goals: a patrimony goal and a sustainable innovation goal. It is in this context that all of the information that is gathered, processed, stored and used by the business constitutes an intangible property which is essential for the development of the business. Knowledge management is the first step of the innovative and creative dynamics of a learning organization. Also note that knowledge creation systems often have little protection, while they are sometimes the source of strategic information for the company. Information generated by installed systems is often more important than the fabrication process of the company. Managers must therefore identify what is most important for their organization, either the system or the information. It seems obvious that the approach of knowledge management is an innovative and creative factor with sustainable competitive benefits. In a context of uncertainty, Companies reinforce their business and basic skills in order to allow the organization to implement underlying experiments and to make innovations emerge. Developing a learning organization also means having a culture of challenge and exchange. This means being able to call into question established systems, to update experiences, and to constantly improve in-house knowledge. Developing a learning organization also means fighting against the obstacles of this collective learning, such as power struggles, personal experience as an asset, competition between individuals or groups of individuals, influence of stakeholders, and access to information. Competitive intelligence is a collective process that acts with one unique goal: the material and intellectual improvement of the whole organization. The common goal must be the priority and has to override often divergent personal interests. An organization becomes successful if, and only if, all its stakeholders act with the same goal and follow the same direction. From information to intangible capital. Today, teamwork is ubiquitous in companies and is equivalent to the most efficient organization, with a more and more systematic implementation of project teams. The importance attached to performance in a competitive environment encourages the managers to pay more attention to the interactions between the team members in order to increase the performance of the projects of these teams. To optimize the performance of a project, one can ponder the levers the manager has and which will result in an improvement of the quality, cost, delay 3-part. A good knowledge management then becomes a key success factor. Indeed, the more regularly the information is shared between the different actors, the more actualized it will be, and it will bring everyone the necessary knowledge to the resolution of a project without delay. All the synergies that can be created within a service, between distinct services, and sometimes among different work groups with different organizations, but for which sharing knowledge are the factor for a collective success. This pooling will help the actors get the right information and acquire the right knowledge at the right time. This way, the project management will improve significantly, which will have a great influence on the success of the organization as a whole. The modern company can be observed by a series of resources that will participate in the life and success of the organization. The resources are tangible and intangible assets that are semi-permanently bound to a firm. The strategic dimension of knowledge can be explained by its competitive advantage in the long term because it cannot be easily reproduced nor replaced. Some even go as far as to say that knowledge has become the essential ingredient for value creation beyond capital and physical resources. We are now all aware that knowledge is one of the main necessary to skill creation in organizations. Skill management within a company will bring innovation and competitiveness to a company. Indeed, skills are intangible elements which depend greatly on the actors who develop them. In this respect, they cannot be easily substituted, replaced, or transferred, and they need a whole transmission procedure that can be long, difficult, and constraining, but which proves to be essential. Nevertheless, in knowledge management, transmission is an important element throughout the organization's development. Knowledge is a structure that is integrated by the actors in the long term and in a rather stable way. It helps understanding various information flows, if used at the right time. Knowledge is the result of a process we can call learning mix. It highlights a cycle of data, of information and knowledge, pyramid, which is built, recycled and rebuilt almost endlessly, and which helps the organization create knowledge throughout its development. Information is a subjective content which must be put into context and shared, and which has a need for alterity while confronted with other information. One cannot forget that information has a limited lifespan. Information is only valid as long as it is useful and until its obsolescence, as we can find in the technology field. It will need a medium to be presented, traded, and emphasized. As for the document, it is a tangible medium for information that should be handled and classified, not to be lost and to be used when necessary. Finally, Knowledge is the building made by information flows that should be documented. These three components can be renewed since new knowledge will emerge and is therefore able to generate new information which, confronted with others through various medium documents, will allow the creation of new knowledge. Considering the complexity of creation and knowledge capitalization, it seems essential to create, within the organizations that have a real will to capitalize their knowledge around their projects, a strict structure in order to capitalize efficiently while keeping certain originality, a special feature and freedom on the projects. The tool that will allow this structuring and the protection of knowledge is what we call a knowledge management tool. Knowledge management. We could simply define knowledge management, KM, as an approach which helps identifying, preserving, enhancing, sharing and actualizing information within an organization. These 5 notions require complete processes and need to be linked to each level of the company in order to get to the expected resultant, which is the creation of a true collective intelligence that will go beyond the frontiers and constraints of individual knowledge to form a single information reservoir, a knowledge register from which anyone would be able to draw information to complete their knowledge, thus allowing a better success or to reach a set goal faster in a project. The processes that result in an efficient knowledge management imply a whole reflection on the distinct knowledge to be mobilized and on the way it can be used and exploited during these 5 phases. The KM concept truly appeared under this name in the 1990s, and has known a rapid development. Today, it can rely on an important view developed especially by Nonaka and Takeuchi. They have divided knowledge into 2 forms, which are explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge can be defined as the whole of tangible knowledge which can be easily identified since it has a concrete reality. For example, it is the case for statistical or financial data which will be stored in computer databases and which can be easily used by anyone on the condition that they are available and that the actors are aware of their existence, their interest and how to extract fragments from these bases in order to work on a specific subject. As opposed to explicit knowledge, tacit knowledge precisely belongs to the field of intangible capital. It does not relate to what is obvious, which can be understood only with the provided information, but on the contrary, relates to a knowledge which depends on a person's background and requires specific skills to be mastered. It can be know-how, for example. Know-how is a key item in the achievement of any project, but it also requires experience, a repetition of achievement, and thus entails a period of acquisition of knowledge which will be very variable depending on the person and the means available to master it. In companies, knowledge management is essential to ensure the competitiveness of the organization in today's very tense situation. However, it is quite difficult to convey tacit knowledge. This is why the professional techniques that supervise the knowledge management tool are more and more specific and complex. The main features of knowledge management consist in fixing the loss of a useful and reliable resource for the company. The reason can be, for instance, retirement or a transfer. Depending on the case, acquired knowledge about the company, the market or any other knowledge related to the organization, is not or poorly conveyed since retirement, though it can be planned, does not leave room for the sharing of past experiences. The person in question must be active and operational until his/her retirement. Knowledge management also demonstrates its usefulness for companies in which communication is poor and information is often hard to identify and extract. Knowledge management also allows the company to avoid making mistakes that already happened in the past. Indeed, it will record corrections or comments. Thus, when a new person has to repeat the same type of action, whether he or she was the one who made the initial mistake or not, he or she can benefit from the community of practice to avoid making the same mistakes again and to adopt the right, corrected, method on the first try. Knowledge management is a tool available to every actor in the company and especially to the decision makers. A better prepared decision will offer better results of a better quality. Indeed, thanks to knowledge management, and all the tools it includes, actors can have an easier and faster access to the information they need. They can also obtain knowledge faster and use the extra time to exchange and be more efficient in their management. The time that will become available thanks to the gain in research speed should also be used for the capitalization of new knowledge developed in the finished project. This is the principle of the knowledge creation process and renewal of existing knowledge that we studied supra. The competitive intelligence system viewed by French people. Christian Harbelot, in 1990, defined the competitive intelligence process as the search and the systematic interpretation of the information available to all, to decipher the actor's intentions and to know their abilities. It includes all the supervision actions of the competitive environment, protection, monitoring, influence, and differs from traditional information thanks to the nature of its field of application, since it is about open information and, therefore, requires the respect of a credible deontology, its stakeholders' identity, as all the staff and managers, and not solely experts anymore, contribute to the building of a collective culture of information, its cultural specificities, since every national economy produces an original model of competitive intelligence which has a different impact on industrial and commercial strategies according to the countries. Henri Mart, 1994, builds on the work of Harbelot and redefines the process as follows. Competitive intelligence can be defined as a set of coordinate actions of research, the processing and spreading of useful information for its exploitation by economic players. These actions are carried out legally with all the protection guarantees necessary for the preservation of the company's property, in the best conditions in terms of time allowed and costs. Useful information is the one necessary for the different levels of decision of the company or the collectivity, to coherently develop and implement the required strategy and tactics to achieve the goals set by the company in order to improve its position in its competitive environment. These actions inside the company are organized around a continuous cycle, generating a shared view of the corporate goals. Nearly 10 years after the Mart report, Bernard Carayon, in 2003, builds on the subject and gives his own personal view. Finally, in 2009, Claude Revel suggests a definition that seems to reach consensus. According to her, competitive intelligence is information literacy to adapt management in advance. Competitive intelligence consists of 3 strands. The first one deals with information processing. It consists in gathering the necessary information, and sorting and validating them. In other words, this first strand consists in obtaining the relevant information about the competitors, about the rules and standards, and in general terms about the entire international and external environment. The second strand consists in securing oneself materially but above all immaterially, that is to say, being able to anticipate risks and issues related to intellectual property, to attacks on image or capital. This second strand gives great importance to intangible assets security. The third strand consists in knowing how to influence and argue, to persuade, to negotiate, to lobby professionally, but also in knowing how to exert normative influence by anticipating the international rules and standards and eventually participating in their development. Competitive intelligence helps knowing better about the competitors, the customers, the rules and standards which can influence the business, and therefore being actors of the environment rather than being subjected to it. It should be noted, however, that competitive intelligence should be deontological and far from industrial espionage, theft and influence peddling practices. In France, for a long time this process was intended for intelligence services. Now, competitive intelligence remains a process almost exclusively carried out by the state. The state is still convinced that, except for some major groups, SME are unqualified in this field. As a consequence, apart from companies, all stakeholders boast about practicing competitive intelligence: regions, chambers of commerce, research and innovation agencies, competitive clusters, etc., except that in practice, and unlike in Anglo-Saxon countries, the French state does not share its economic information with other stakeholders. As seen previously, a state can become an opportunity or a threat to an organization. The state, by itself, is a factor of uncertainty. The French state could have a more offensive constituent in its competitive intelligence practices, especially by promoting exposure of the agricultural, industrial and service sectors, supporting the acquisition of international public contracts, financially helping the creation and influence of standards, and through making economic information public and accessible to companies. For example, the studies of the statistics branch could be more targeted and accessible to the French companies, as well as for economic missions abroad. The CIA Matrix. Based on several researches, Jeremie Aboiron has created and published in 2019 a framework of competitive intelligence actions. Keeping watch on your environment. Keeping watch on your environment means applying all environment analysis tools that exist in the strategic management field, and that we have reviewed in the first part. This need corresponds to the company's most favorable situation, for the company is in a leadership position, with a very strong strategic capability and a rare and inimitable competitive advantage. The company being a leader on its market, it must endeavor to keep that advantage by keeping watch on its environment. This entails keeping up with technological evolutions, or even imposing new critical success factors, ensuring the highest level of customer satisfaction by responding accurately to shifts in demand, keeping the sophistication level at the best value for money by making an effort to raise the barriers to entry, and finally, following political and legal changes in its sector and linked sectors. Influencing the environment. In which cases do we need to influence the environment? As we have discussed above with the Blue Ocean strategy, influencing the environment is important when there is a strong competitive intensity on the market. It is therefore necessary to create new critical success factors in order to lead competitors to a yet untapped path. This can also be an opportunity to restrict the market with new standards or regulations through lobbying actions. This situation occurs when the company has a high rarity level and yet a moderate or high level of imitability. This means that either the sector realizes its full potential and that the access to technologies and/or to the market becomes imitable and substitutable, or the competitive advantage and rarity are easily imitable as they can be quickly accessed by competitors or new entrants. Protecting the assets. Protecting the assets of a company means protecting your associates, your tangible and intangible assets, and your skills. It means protecting your key associates, but also the ones who represent a risk factor considering their access to the company's inside information or their exposure to risk areas. Protecting your tangible assets means controlling the access to sensitive areas. Sensitivity can be explained by the fragility or the degree of danger of the material that is used, by the cost and rarity of the technologies that are used, but also by the skills that constitute a competitive advantage. However, it also means protecting your intangible assets with trademarks and patents application in order to lock the market for the duration of the exploitation of the technology, and thus helping research and development find new and more innovative technologies. The need for protection can present itself on two occasions. Upon starting up, if you know beforehand that the technology or skills will rapidly be imitable. Or, when the sector has reached its full potential, to limit temporarily the access to the market to new entrants or substitute products. Managing the risks. Finally, the management of risks is done in a situation when rarity and imitability are at their most dangerous level for the company. The competitive intensity is high, the resources and skills are not rare and fully imitable. In that case, the company must manage its risks, especially its technological and commercial risks. As the development of the key points mentioned above is not the subject of this part, we have chosen to remain concise about their contents, their applications and their solutions. However, they are to be found on the following matrix. The aim of this matrix is to position the level of competitiveness in accordance with the two variables we have pointed out, rarity and imitability. Depending on its position in the matrix, this model will help the organization work out what action must be implemented first in terms of strategic intelligence. This model can be adapted to different business sectors and can meet the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises. Using this matrix can also help the company analyze and follow the progress of its competitiveness. The indicator helps organize the organization's resources and skills and thus creates a dynamic capability that will strengthen the organization's non-imitability. This matrix helps adapt the actions to be implemented according to the organization's competitiveness, which will allow the conservation of its leadership and to maintain itself on a more and more competitive market. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe to the channel.